Welcome to Tuareg Talk number 2, which is a series I'm doing in place of a dedicated review of my Tuareg or the Tuareg in general. I've been putting off reviewing my Tuareg for a long time, and the reason for that is I don't believe I can summarize my thoughts, feelings, and experience with this bike in just one video. Please excuse the lighting, it took me a bit to get up here. I just finished, well, I'm halfway through the most challenging ride I've done on my Tuareg. That video should be up prior to this video. I still have to make it back down, and I genuinely think I'm not going to make it without dropping the bike, and there were quite a few times on the way up to here that I came very close to dropping the bike. I don't know what kind of justice the video will do for the types of obstacles I faced to make it up to where I'm currently at, but those of you who record videos and watch them back and understand how the trail gets flattened by a recording should hopefully be able to tell how ridiculous the obstacles I went over were. But I think this is a good opportunity to talk about how modified my Tuareg is, or how modified my Tuareg is not. If you've seen some of my riding videos, you may think to yourself that I have a ton of off-road mods on my bike, I have a ton of protection, and I'm ready to do the crazy stuff that I've done on my bike, but the reality is I only have a handful of mods on my machine. To put it simply, the reason my Tuareg is so lightly modified is just money. I hadn't really anticipated adventure riding being as expensive as it is, and being new to the sport, I didn't have any gear going into it. I didn't realize how quickly crash protection would add up. I didn't realize how expensive luggage was. I didn't realize how expensive appropriate gear like decent riding boots and riding pants were. So it's been a pretty big challenge to accumulate this stuff over the couple of seasons that I've had so far. So first up, I'll be running through the mods that are on my bike, and I'll run through them in the order that I installed them. First and foremost is basic crash protection. I have crash bars and a skid plate on there, and thankfully Outback Motortech understands that people who want crash bars and people who want a skid plate, they probably also want the other piece of that kit. So you get a little bit of a discount if you buy the crash bars with the skid plate from Outback Motortech, and that's what I went for. I'm really happy with the protection, and despite numerous bracket failures on the skid plate, I'm still really happy with it, and I can still recommend it. Outback Motortech has sent me a handful of replacement brackets since it's an issue I've encountered numerous times, and things seem to be holding up pretty well with the newest bracket on there, which I did throw some JB weld on around the seam that seems to be breaking, just kind of at random from time to time. Once I had the crash protection on the bike, my next priority was being able to do overnight trips on it off of challenging trails. And because of that, I installed a rear rack. I went with the AXP plastic rear rack, mainly because of how slim it looked on the bike. A lot of the racks that I saw, especially the metal ones, kind of just jumped out so far off the rear of the bike, and I wanted to keep as slim of a profile as I possibly could. And I figured the plastic would be lighter weight, which is pretty good because if you can see it there, hopefully the lighting is decent enough. It's high up on the back of the bike. I don't want a lot of weight up there if I can avoid it. And just a reminder, this is a very short list. I'm down to the final mod on my Tuareg. It's just tires. A really basic one, and you might not consider that to be a modification of the bike. I certainly do. It drastically changed the riding characteristics of the bike, and thinking back to putting those tires on there, I kind of wish they were the first thing I did on the bike. I think the first handful of falls that I had, or the first handful of times I dropped the bike, I don't think I would have had I had better tires on there. That being said, my favorite mods are, of course, the crash protection, the bars, the skid plate, and the tires. I have the Motaz Tractionator Dual Venture in the front and the Motaz Tractionator Adventure in the rear. I did get a puncture in the rear tire, maybe 1,000 miles into it, which is really unfortunate because one of the reasons I went with the Adventure is because the longevity it offers is absurd. I was thinking I'd get a good 6,000 miles out of it, whereas the Ral Z, which I really wanted, would have probably only given me 3,000 or 4,000 solid miles. But I ended up getting a puncture in the rear tire after 1,000, and that made me wish I had just gone with the Ral Z. So I do have a Ral Z on hand at home, but I'm just riding out the patched rear tire as far as it will get me. So just because my Tuareg is lightly modified and I'm happy with where it's at being lightly modified, that doesn't mean I don't have a long list of things I'd like to add to it for protection, performance, whatever it may be. So the second part of this video is going to be me running through everything I want to add to the Tuareg, kind of in no particular order. I do have an item that I really want to prioritize, and I'll just jump into that one first. But I'd like to share what I want to do with the Tuareg as time goes on, and I'm open to your input, your feedback, maybe some modifications you did and regret, or some modifications you really want to do to your bike. So let me bust out my notes, because when I record, I can't remember what I went to say. My videos are not scripted, I kind of just blast through them. But I've got a list here, and let's go for it. So first up, I very, very, very much want, and I plan to do it this year. I planned, past tense, to do it this year, but life, economy, jobs, that sort of stuff, not really going as I had expected, but that's kind of life, I guess. But bar protection. I have no bar protection on this bike, and I have dropped it, I think I'm up to 8 times now in rocky terrain, and I've been very lucky. I've been very lucky. I have bent my levers, I think both of them actually. When I bent my left lever, it actually made it kind of easier for me to use one finger to clutch, which is something I do from time to time. I vary up the amount of fingers I use, but it was actually kind of nice that I didn't have crash protection because now I'm happier with the way the lever performs. That being said, I don't really trust these plastic guards, even though they've held up well so far. They've bent out of place, they've warped out of place, but I think they've offered at least a little bit of protection for me and helped me when it came to not destroying my levers or bars while dropping the bike. Please excuse the wind. I don't know how bad it is. I have this dead cat on the microphone, but there might be a lot of wind noise coming through, so hopefully you can understand me. And I'm not going to go into details on too many things, but for the bar protectors, I am pretty dead set on the HDB kit for a number of reasons. I know people generally go with Bark Busters. That's a good name. I think they look better. But the way the Bark Busters mount on this bike, and I think most bikes, is they take over the end cap of your handlebars, and then they mount kind of halfway between your mounting bracket and that end cap. And something I've mentioned on this bike in some of my videos, or at least one of them, is that this bracket bends out of place for me when I drop the bike and it has an impact on the handlebars. With the HDB bar protectors, they wrap around and they go all the way to the bracket, and they actually have a replacement piece that seems more rigid and sturdy for that bracket. So it seems to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone if I upgrade to the HDB kit for my handlebars. Next up along the handlebar category is just mirrors. I'm still running the stock mirrors. I've dropped the bike on them. I've had impacts on them. The mirrors have slid on the ground. They're holding up all right. I'd just like some adjustable mirrors, or more easily adjustable mirrors that I can tuck out of the way for tight off-road scenarios, or just stand a better chance that they won't be terribly impacted should they take an impact. This next one is kind of a performance thing, and I know a handful of people have done this to their Tuareg. I've heard rumors, I don't know if they're true, but apparently in different countries or different parts of the world, the Tuareg comes with a different air filter. And if you don't happen to know, the air filter is actually this kind of top tank in here. It's very easy to disassemble this part of the bike and access the air filter. But there are reports that the stock air filter doesn't really have a good seal, and there's dust getting through there and dust getting into the airbox. I haven't opened mine up to check. I avoid dust like the plague, but obviously where I ride, how I ride, I have been exposed to dust. So I want to open up my airbox and I want to look at it, but I will wait until I have a replacement air filter to do that. I want to switch to something called a unifilter. I think it's a foam air filter. And then I'll just need to use some all-purpose grease to create a solid seal under there. But I am curious to see if I do have dust in my airbox, because there have been reports of that. I don't know if I'll get better performance out of it. I don't know if it'll change the induction noise that I and many people love on the Tuareg, but that is on my list of modifications to do to this bike. Another good one, and this is a cheaper one, but I still haven't gotten around to it, is a sensor delete for the kickstand sensor. On some bikes, you can kind of just, I think, splice some wires together, and then you don't have to worry about the kickstand sensor failing and leaving you stranded. On this bike, that's not the case, but thankfully a handful of companies make a special module that you can use. You can connect it to your bike. I think it's a relatively easy process, and that way, if your kickstand sensor takes a huge impact and isn't working properly, your bike will still run, your engine will still run. And those of you who have seen my Schofield Pass ride and some other people on YouTube who have done some crazy rides in their Tuaregs should know that the kickstand bolt sometimes snaps off and leaves the kickstand dangling. And while you don't want to ride with the kickstand dangling, it's really close to the sensor, and it has me really nervous that that sensor will eventually take an impact and break and leave me stranded. So that's on my list of things just to make the bike a little bit more reliable out in the wild. On that same topic, another common failure point is the pivot bolts for the shift lever, the pivot bolt for the shift lever and the pivot bolt for the rear brake. Apparently those can, if they take the right impact, snap, and the bolt will be stuck screwed in there and your lever will be hanging off. And you can upgrade those to titanium pivot bolts, and then you're more likely to have your lever bend, which you can likely just bend back into place and carry on with your ride. Another cheap one, I think they're maybe $30 to $40 each. It's just not the kind of thing I want to spend money on right now. This one I have in mind, but I don't really have a need for it. I did, in one of my first few falls, bend my left foot peg, and it was actually kind of a blessing because it popped out that little rubber mounting piece, And when I put my foot back on the foot peg and felt the amount of grip I had, I was so happy with it. And I ripped off the other rubber piece on the opposite foot peg. And I've been really happy with the foot pegs. They're a giant platform. They've taken a ton of impacts for me and they've held up well. I think I'm driven to change them just because it seems like everyone does. But the Tuareg comes with excellent foot pegs. I just have it on my list as something to make the bike a little bit more mine, but it's not really something I'm really aching to upgrade on the machine. I am surprised I am saying this next one because I run rackless luggage. I want to camp in places that are difficult to get to, and because of that, I like keeping the bike as slim as possible. And rackless luggage, the way that tucks into the bike and wraps into the bike, my Tuareg does not feel very different to me when I'm running my overnight camping setup on it, which maybe it should, maybe that is representative of a lack of experience, but the bike feels excellent with the luggage on and with the luggage off. I run the Rackless 80 kit from Moscow Moto. I have the third version, but I think they're all pretty similar. And while I'm really, really happy with it, I sometimes look at the pannier setups and think it looks a little bit more convenient than my rolling waterproof bags. So I would eventually, for longer trips, like to get a pannier setup and probably run something like the other offering from Moscow Moto. It's kind of like the soft pannier bags. It looks like a cool setup. It looks like it holds a little bit more luggage than what I'm used to. And it looks like accessing anything I might need to would be way more convenient than it is with the rolling luggage. This next one is another sort of reliability one. A weird quirk about the Aprilia Tuareg is the rear axle nut comes in a 26 millimeter size. And I believe the standard across the industry is 27 millimeters. So if you find a multi-tool that is like a bead breaker, an axle nut remover, that kind of thing, just to carry with you if you end up getting stranded and need to throw a tube in your bike or something like that, the Tuareg just has an obscure size of 26 millimeters. And I'd like to eventually change that to a 27 millimeter. I'm terrified to say this out loud because I feel like I'm bringing some bad juju my way, but I don't carry tools to put a tube in my bike. I don't carry a tube. I don't carry something to remove the rear tire. I do carry a patch kit and I've used it before, but if I'm stranded on a trail, there's a much higher likelihood of someone passing by who happens to have a 27 millimeter wrench than there is someone who has a 26 millimeter. And then anybody I might ride with probably has a 27 millimeter rear axle nut, and being able to share and combine tools and resources is a little bit more convenient if I have a generic size for that. This next one is something I desperately wanted to throw onto my bike as quickly as I possibly could when I want it, and now I don't think about it at all. One of the reasons I went with the Outback Motortech protection setup is there are mounting brackets for auxiliary lights in the front. I did not realize how expensive auxiliary lights were. And I have ridden trails at night, not really by choice, but having it just take a little bit longer to get out to the trails than I thought it would. And I would love to have auxiliary lights, but when I look at the cost of a decent kit for that, I can't justify it. I'd rather spend that money on actually doing a decent trip on the Tuareg or investing into something that's gonna offer the bike a little bit more resilience, like those bar protectors. All right, coming up to the last two, these will both be performance modifications. The first one, it seemed very important when I got the bike, just like the aux lights, and now I've sort of changed my mind on it, but in exhaust. I don't have many complaints with the sound of the bike. I love the induction noise. I think the exhaust sounds okay. It's got a little bit of a squeak that I hear, and I don't really like that, but to drop a little bit of weight and to go with something that matches the appearance of the bike a little bit better, I don't say Leo Vince correctly. I think it's supposed to be like Leo Vince or something. I just say Leo Vince. There's a Leo Vince Evo exhaust for this bike, and it's mainly blacked out, and it looks phenomenal. I'd like to throw one of those on the bike eventually, but those of you who keep up with my Tuareg and my videos probably know that I currently have a few pending warranty repairs on the bike, and one of the major reasons I haven't gone with an exhaust outside of finances is I want to use my warranty to the fullest I can. And I have a warranty on this bike until the middle of next year, the middle of 2025, and there's no mileage limit on that, and I'm going to capitalize and make sure I have that warranty available. I do think the restrictive catalytic converter in this bike running a little too lean is not contributing to good long-term engine health, but while I have warranty, I'm going to let the bike run how it runs from the factory, and then I'll deal with that stuff later on. And then finally, something that's never been tremendously appealing to me, but I think I'd like to get it on the bike eventually, is a quick shifter. This bike is so clunky to shift, but it's part of the riding experience, and I've enjoyed it so far. I do a lot of clutchless upshifts nowadays, and when you're off-roading technical trails like I like to, you're using so much clutch anyway. That being said, to just exaggerate this bike's performance through the use of something like a quick shifter, and to take extra advantage of the ride-by-wire this bike has, and have upshifts and downshifts and all that sort of stuff. On the street would be so much fun. On the trails would be so much fun. But I kind of look at that as something that, one, costs a lot of money, and two, is something else that might just break on the bike. I've also heard of reports that it negatively impacts the bike's ability to, or impacts the rider's ability to get the bike into neutral, which it's already a bit finicky of a motorcycle to do. Prior to this, I only had Kawasaki's, and those have like positive neutral finder, which makes it very, very easy. This seems like neutral is a flash in the pan. The amount of times I've shifted between 1 and 2 before finding neutral is probably most times I've put the bike into neutral. But yeah, the purpose of this video is just to give you a baseline for where my Tuareg is at, an idea of where I want my Tuareg to be, and that way you have kind of a reference or a frame of mind to go alongside my Tuareg Talks, which again is a series where I'm going to be talking about different aspects of this bike and my ownership. It's not really like a comprehensive review or anything. It's just topic after topic, and it will be an ongoing thing that I update as I have more experience riding this machine. But that's it. Those are my Tuareg mods. Those are the Tuareg mods that I want. I am very high up on the most challenging trail I have ever ridden, and I have to ride back down. I don't want to. I'm quite nervous. It's going to be loose, steep, slippery, scary, but I'm ready to get out of here. I'm ready to go home. But look out for my 2 previous videos. Today I took this thing on a tight, windy, steep, loose ATV trail, and it was difficult and scary. And then from there, I took it on what I thought was going to be an easy trail, and it turned out to be the most challenging, chunky, steep, disgusting ride this Tuareg has ever faced. So if you haven't seen those riding videos, definitely look out for those, and look out for more Tuareg talks. If you have not yet subscribed to the channel, please consider doing that. I currently have a lot of videos on the way, and I'm excited to continue contributing to the attention that this bike deserves. But thank you for watching. Thank you for being here, and see you next time.